I have the benefit of having been in Uganda during the election of 2006 when Chiza Besigye had just arrived from abroad and he was vying against his all-time nemesis, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. That election was very interesting because for the first time I saw people very interested in an individual, and there was celebrations all over the place, and there was slogans, Musaja Agenda, Musaja Agenda, and everybody was rallying behind Chiza Besigye. And I got very interested in that election because I had never seen people love a man that much. So I observed the election keenly as a young African in a foreign country. And subsequently, I have then gained a lot of interest in subsequent elections in Uganda. And the one that touches my memory a lot is the election of 2021, where a youthful candidate, Robert Kyagulanyi, was going against Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. This election was very meaningful, and it was going to have a lot of dividends for African young people across the continent. And that is why I particularly paid a lot of interest in this election as a political and policy analyst on African affairs and African politics. I have been compelled to make this video because I have lots of friends from Uganda who sort of believe that Robert Kyagulanyi won the election and the regime of Museveni took the win away from him. But I slightly differ with that presupposition, because I totally believe that that election was for Robert Kyagulanyi to win. However, there are certain mistakes that his election campaign team made, and those mistakes costed him the win. So up to this point, I believe Kyagulanyi did not win, though he was best placed to win. And there are certain things, if they had been done right, he'd have won straight. So for the purpose of the next election of 2026, where I still route for Robert Kyagulanyi, and I still believe if he sorts out these errors that he made in 2021, then the win could be on his side. I will therefore say some things that maybe if anybody that is closer to him finds them relevant, they can share and try to find a working framework within which they can sort those issues. Number one, there's no election that is won without data in these current times. There's no election that is won without research, and there's no election that is won without organization. So in a nutshell, Kyagulanyi's election campaign failed on organization. If you were to win against an incumbent like Museveni, you actually needed to organize your campaign team properly. Let's take this quick hanging fruit in the context of the population of Uganda. Today, Uganda has a population that is mainly young people with a median age of 15.7%. That is one of the youngest populations in the whole world. And the youth account for about 77% of that population. That means there's a huge youthful vote, so because people from 18 years to 35 years are quite many in Uganda. And these are the people that were supporting Robert Kyagulanyi because they echo his message, the message of redemption, the message of a new generation, the message of the youthful takeover of power in Africa, and all those things. So if this population would have been organized properly, harnessed properly, there is no way Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was going to beat Robert Kyagulanyi. Remember, in that election, the total registered voters was 18 million voters. And out of these 18 million voters, about 10 million voters were elderly people, and just slightly about 7-point-something million were young people. And out of that 7-point-something million young voters, how many really turned out to vote for Kyagulanyi? So ideally, even going on that disparity already, Museveni was way ahead, because you know the geopolitical factors in Uganda. There are people who believe that Museveni brought in a reign of order from the military coups they had from time to time, and that generation owes Museveni a lot. They will always go to the ballot and vote him. So we need young voters who now resonate with the current message, and they are not indebted to that historical background. And that is now the population that Robert Kyagulanyi was supposed to focus on. In which particular format. You can imagine, out of all those registered voters, do you know that only about 500,000 youth had registered in Kampala district alone? And then it was followed by Wakiso district, which had about 454,000 registered young people. And then you expected these numbers to add up into a winning formula. Remember the election results, Museveni got about 6 million and Kyagulanyi got about 3 million. So you can imagine if Kyagulanyi had harnessed on this youthful population, facilitated them to register as voters, and then ensure that they turn out and vote. This is how Kyagulanyi was going to win this election fair and square. For the purposes of 2026, because I am always a futuristic person and I don't really stick in the past, so I will talk to Robert Kyagulanyi concerning the future. If Robert Kyagulanyi is supposed to wants to win the election of 2026, which I totally believe is a very easy thing for him, let this election be organized properly. Let him cast his net wider in the sense that a lot of African people resonate with Kyagulanyi's message of redemption from the old guard. A lot of young, vibrant people outside Uganda resonate with that. Can Robert Kyagulanyi's team, for the purpose of winning the election of 2026, which is very meaningful for the sake of redemption and for the sake of returning Uganda to a palatable country that competes favorably with its peers in this generation. May he cast his nets wider, look for people from even out of Uganda who can sit down and streamline an election machine. Number two, Robert Kyagulanyi should use this time that is remaining to seek for funding across the globe, because the message he holds, many people resonate with it. There is so many Ugandan communities in Europe and in different places. Let him go to these people and ask them for money so that they can change the country back home. And once that is done, because an election is won with money, an election is not one with slogans and all that thing. Number three, Robert Kyagulanyi should drop that tag of ghetto president, because sitting in the state house of a country is no longer ghetto. You are now a global leader. Now, can you churn out a message that resonates with even the elites in Uganda who would like to be part of your campaign, who would like to fund you and not look like they are funding some ghetto project? Drop that slogan. It's not adding value. Now, as the ghetto slogan helped you to become MP because you were talking to the local population where you grew up. But now this is a nationalistic conversation. You have to appeal to people that have the money, people that have the power, people that have they know where to go through. And these people do not necessarily come from the ghetto. They do not resonate with the ghetto message. They don't understand the ghetto message. So drop that slogan and adapt a more nationalistic and hopeful slogan that can give hope to many Ugandans across the board. Number three, help the young people to register as voters. That is where it starts. Elections are won at grassroots levels, and especially a presidential vote, it is won at grassroots levels. So if you want to win the presidency in 2026, go to Uganda's doorsteps. Help young people that have not registered for identity cards, go and register for those identity cards. Follow up with the systems, because now you have established your own people within the government structures. Enable these young people to get their identity cards processed in good time. Follow up these numbers and then help them acquire voters cards. With this, you can easily now go down and write down and say, in this particular district, I have this number of people. We help to get ID cards, we help to get voters cards, and out of this, we think a certain percentage will turn out and vote for us. So that's how it starts. Basically, you have to do groundwork, and if there's no groundwork, there's no vote. In Africa, people will celebrate you. People will stand on top of cars and scream your name. But converting that noise into a vote, that's where it differentiates a leader from. And that is how Museveni quickly won this election. Because out of those 10 million registered old people, they are those who believe in his message. And because they know they have grown through the times when Uganda was in turmoil, when Uganda was going through a lot of things, and this man comes and settles and brings a certain orderly way of doing things, they are indebted to him. And that is why for him, he did his groundwork. And those are his people. That 10 million people are his voters. And he was just saying, maybe if 6 million turnout, I have won the election. And that is what exactly happened. The only thing that made Robert Kyagulanyi fail to clinch the presidency of Uganda was the absence of a vote hunting mechanism. If you establish your vote hunting mechanism and focus on this key population that is young people, help them register as citizens, help them register as voters, and then mop them up and give them down this message of hope, they will turn out and vote. Robert Kyagulanyi fell into the same trap that Kizza Besigye fell in 2006. When Kizza Besigye came back to the country, he was celebrated by so many people. And so he believed he had won the election. So he did not take time to convert that celebration and that noise and those slogans and those songs into votes. And that is why Museveni quickly and easily beat him in that election. So as we are walking into 2026, which is not very far away, can Robert Kyagulanyi start converting this noise, these followers, these fans into actual votes? There was a lot of social media presence for Robert Kyagulanyi on social media. There was a lot of youthful voices. There's a lot of celebrations all over the place. But did these people actually turn out to vote for him? They did not. And that is where the election broke. I strongly condemn the events that followed the election, like detaining Robert Kyagulanyi in his house, going for his family and all that. That was so improper for the regime of the day to do. But actually, we got there because we were ourselves to blame. If Robert had worked on this winning formula much earlier, converting that noise, converting those chants, converting those celebrations into actual votes, Museveni would be a thing of the past right now. So we as young Africans must stand up and support all these initiatives coming up. And that is why even in Kenya, we support Robert, but we want him to do things systematically and with a particular formula geared towards winning. And when this environment is there, even as we could easily help in that engineering to make sure that things work the way they're supposed to work, there's no other way of beating that tyrant other than organizing. So for me, I am crying out loud for Robert's team. Sit down in retrospection. The election of 2021 is gone and it's now non-consequential. Focus on 2026 and observe those very things. Number one, do funding adequately. Number two, have an organized campaign running mechanism. Number three, hunt for the vote. Make sure you establish your core vote, which is the young people of Uganda. If you establish your core vote that you know these ones are mine, it is easy to just top up with a sway vote. And luckily enough, in Uganda, the core vote is young people who can easily buy into Bobi's message. But the sway vote is the elderly people who may not be so meaningful if the young people overwhelmingly vote for their candidate. So as you go into the next election, which is very near, sometimes it looks far away, but it's very near, organize properly. That will distinguish you from the others, and that will give you the leading hand. So for me, I totally believe it is possible, it can be done, and for it to be done, it requires proper planning.